So for folks who don't know you yet, give us like the quick version. Who are you and how'd you get into doing what you're doing? What are you working on these days?
So my name is Drew Greco. I've been cultivating cannabis in legal regulated markets since 2012. I grew up on the East Coast in Southern Virginia, went to college in North Carolina, and did the traditional market sales kind of thing when I was in college in North Carolina. That's what really got me into weed and believing that it could actually help people. Moved out to Colorado in 2011, just started working at a hydroponic shop, set up our basement with some free equipment that they gave me from the hydroponic shop. And when I first moved out, I was all about organics and brewing teas, and I just wanted to grow the cleanest, most organic weed that I could possibly grow. And quickly realized that the plant doesn't really care between carbon-based organic inputs and mineral-based salt inputs, that it's taking everything up the same way. Right after I moved out to Colorado was when legalization happened, and all these big grows started getting built. So I could see a career path to where um, I could make a living out of just growing cannabis full time. So there was a guy who owned a grow and a dispensary in Garden City up near Greeley. And I begged him for like 6 months to give me a job trimming. And one of his trimmers finally quit. And he got me in. And then one of his growers quit and he put me into the garden. And I just fell in love with it. I moved from Greeley down to Denver and worked in some really large facilities down there. The first facility I ever worked in was the Green Solution facility that I think Columbia Care owns now, or they might have sold it by now, but it was like 5 tiers tall. The crown home, basically like Home Depot racks, 5 tiers tall. We drove around on these crown forklifts that we had to harness ourselves into because they would lift us like 30 feet in the air to work on the top levels. And it was early in the legalization, so they were spraying all kinds of nasty stuff, and the infrastructure in the building wasn't properly built, so those top tiers were just covered in bugs and mold, and it was absolutely disgusting. So I saw some really nasty stuff in the first couple years that I was working in Denver. I ended up leaving there. I went to True Cannabis and worked for Rob Janey for about a year and a half, and I really credit him with introducing me to large scale cannabis cultivation. It was about a 15,000 square foot facility. We had 4 flower rooms that were on a perpetual harvest cycle. So pretty much every week we were cutting down like 1 or 2 rows out of every room, never fully taking down a full room so that it could be cleaned and reset. We were only taking down rows, cleaning those benches, resetting those benches. So it was cool to see that with the proper IPM practices and the proper control of a building, that you could actually perpetually harvest like that and still keep a clean garden and a clean product. And he really nailed into my head the importance of sticking on schedule, and your clone schedule, your prune schedule, your harvest schedule, and being able to anticipate those harvests and anticipate when your money is going to be coming in and plan your year. That he was huge in implementing that for me. They ended up selling that garden. Some new owners came in. I left there and hopped around to a couple other smaller gardens in Denver. And then I got my first management opportunity under Willie Gardner at Mayflower Farms. He had a consulting contract with them and he couldn't be there every day because he was running his own facility. So he brought me in as the day-to-day manager. We had 5 flower rooms, 2 veg rooms, and about 20 people on staff. So that was really my first experience with managing people all day, which changes the game drastically when you have to worry about plants and managing 20 different egos and personalities all day long. So that was a great learning experience for me. That owner actually ended up selling to another company, and they brought in a whole grow team and fired all the managers. So I went out to California for a little bit, worked with Jack Whipple at the HD Biotech facility when he first got out to Cali. And while I was out there with him, I got an offer for a grow in Massachusetts that was being built. So in 2019, I moved out to Massachusetts. They were still in the construction phase when I moved out there. So helped them hire staff, write SOPs, train staff when we got plants in the building. We crushed in that facility for about 2 years. And then I just got tired of the cold and the rain in Massachusetts. And I had a buddy out here in Vegas who had another management contract with a license owner. So came out here to the warmer weather and was managing some facilities for them. In 2022, I started consulting for a company in St. Louis and was helping them with a design and build for 100,000 square foot indoor facility. They had a extract company and they were just buying wholesale from other grows in St. Louis or in Missouri. So they were planning to build their own facility so they could cut down those costs and produce their own flower. But when the stock market crashed in 2022, they lost like all of their funding, all their investors backed out. So we literally submitted plans to the city for approval like the week before all their investors backed out. So the facility never got built, unfortunately. But that was another great learning experience of connecting with all the different vendors and getting pricing and estimates and working with the MEP team and all the architects to make sure that the facility was designed for an efficient workflow and all the HVAC was engineered correctly. The MEP team we worked with was great. They were really smart and they have some experience with building grows, but from working in a lot of those warehouses in Denver, I just knew that a lot of people that know a lot about HVAC don't know anything about plants and they don't understand transpiration. Working for Green Man, they had that facility out in Aurora that was like two 60,000 square foot rooms with just tables in the middle of them. And they had these huge train HVAC units that were like as big as a house inside each of those rooms. And that train tech was there like every other day because they just kept shutting down. He was like, I just don't understand. We have these same units at the Broncos stadium and they're perfect. They're up and running. And I was like, yeah, but they don't fill that place with 10,000 plants, dude. Like it's not the same thing. So that was cool to get some experience with design and the electrical and the plumbing and all of that stuff. That was a lot of fun. Then I went to Flower One out here in Las Vegas. I was managing their 9-acre glass house for a year and a half. So that was another pretty incredible experience. I'd never worked on that scale before. I'd actually never grown in a greenhouse before that either. But that really opened my eyes to the possibility of growing indoor quality flower in a greenhouse. If a greenhouse can be controlled correctly, you can absolutely grow the same quality flower as you can indoors. Was with them for a year. They were in a massive amount of debt when I got hired and just couldn't crawl out of that hole. So they ended up shutting down in December of 2023. And then in March of 2024, I took over the greenhouse that I'm currently at now, which is Solaris Farms. It's a 24,000 square foot mixed light facility. We have 6 houses, 1 veg and 5 flower. 3 of the flower houses are double-ended HPS supplemental lighting, and 2 of them are LED supplemental lighting. All pad and fan. We don't have any HVAC or dehumidifiers in any of the grow rooms. That has been exciting for me because I had never grown in pad and fan before. It's actually extremely efficient here in the desert. The hardest months are right now, what we're coming into with the really, really hot weather when it's 110, 120 degrees outside. The amount of water that we have to put across those cooling pads, it's really hard to keep the humidity down below 55, 60%. So playing with different VPDs, different exhausting strategies throughout the day, using our thermal curtain and our shade curtain when temperatures get kind of out of control has been a pretty awesome learning experience. We're about as dialed in, I think, as we can get with the equipment that we have right now. And it's been It's been awesome to learn and grow with the building and kind of figure out the intricacies of the different equipment and how it all works together.
So what's your day-to-day kind of look like right now, with the rooms you're running, the consulting you're doing?
We took a little break in production in November of last year and just started reloading the greenhouse in February of this year. So we actually just took down our first crop of 2026 last week. It's looking absolutely beautiful. We're really excited about it. We work 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the greenhouse Monday through Friday. And then I have like a little skeleton crew that comes in on the weekends just to make sure everything is working. I'm here every morning at 6:30 so I can get into the building, walk through anything that I need to set up for the team so that they can just get in and start working. I'll get set up, but mostly it's just walking through the rooms and making sure nothing drastic happened overnight. All of our curtains opened, all of our lights turned on, the pad pumps are still working and feeding water to the wet walls throughout the day. Really just coaching the team. I always tell people I am a glorified babysitter and a plant coach. Like, I walk through all of our departments, usually starting with post harvest, just checking on how they're binning up, how they're trimming, making sure everyone is kind of on the same page with the work that they're doing, that everybody's trim job looks the same. So we're not putting out really leafy flower in one bag and really close trimmed flower in another bag. We want a consistent look to our flower before it gets packaged. Checking in with the cultivation teams, depending on what they're doing. Our cultivation team has been consistent since about the beginning of last year. So I don't have to check up on them as much now. It's pretty nice. They're all on the same page. They work well together. We've gone through enough trainings to where everybody's pruning to the same height. Yeah, really just checking up on the team, making sure all the work that is supposed to get done is getting done. And then my main job is scheduling, just making sure that my calendar is set for every single week. Usually I'll sit down at the beginning of the year and I'll write down clone dates, transplant dates, room move from veg to flower, and then harvest dates for the entire year. And then kind of go back through on a monthly basis and fill in all the little things that need to get done per week for the month.
Nice. Yep. Sounds familiar. And, you've got a lot of interesting experience running like a kind of wider variety of cultivation setups than most cultivators, which is really cool, and some unusual setups. Tell us a little bit about some of the grows and what makes them different to run than what most people might have seen.
The first place that I managed was a pretty standard indoor facility. I think each room was about 15 to 1900 square feet. So not crazy, crazy big. Rolling benches in each room, double ended HPS. Coming into that facility, they were flowering in 5 gallon pots with soil. They had a very low plant count and everything was kind of spread out. They were popping multiple times, training the plants, spreading them through trellis. And we switched that to a smaller 3 gallon cocoa pot and upped the plant count a lot more. We definitely saw a yield increase. And the thing that I learned quickly was that your yield is going to go up if you can put more plants into the room. Your labor cost is going to go down if you're not topping and training and pruning plants every other week. But your environment has to be able to keep up with that extra plant transpiration and the extra amount of water that you're putting through the soil or the cocoa also. The indoor that I did in Massachusetts was pretty much the same. We had two rooms with LED. So that was my first experience with working with LED and having to keep the rooms a little bit warmer and a little bit more humid because the heat from the HPS isn't supplementing the heat in the room. Really, the first crazy facility that I worked at was Flower One. 9 acres is 492,000 square feet. We were putting 10,000 plants into a zone every 2 weeks. The scheduling for that was the hardest for me to kind of wrap my head around at first. Like, if you're trying to take 14,000 clones to make 10,000 plants get into a zone. We had 8 people just cutting clones 4 days a week nonstop. Every process that you're doing, including transplanting, we started with moving crops from veg to flower and ended up scrapping that idea and just vegging in the bay because it was so many plants. Figuring out the schedule and the workflow for that when every single process takes like 3 days that was very, very hard for me. In between Flower One and this greenhouse, I worked at a place called Stackhouse here in Nevada, which was an agrify facility, which are those little pods that they build it was like 172 pods on this 2-story catwalk type setup. In theory, I think it's a genius idea. I think for like microgreens and vegetables, it's an absolutely genius idea. But then when you start putting in multiple different strains of cannabis that grow taller than those pods are actually built, it gets a little wonky. And then the other thing I didn't like about that was each individual pod has its own AC, its own dehumidifier, its own irrigation valves. And so you multiply a normal facility by like 50 times with the stuff that can just break and that you have to fix every single day. I mean, you think about a facility like I'm working in now where each room has irrigation, or we don't have DHU or AC here, but if it was indoor, like each room would have its own AC and DHU. That's only 6 units that you have to worry about. When you get to 172 pods, like something's breaking every single day, trying to keep up with the maintenance on that was absolutely insane.
Man, that sounds like a nightmare.
It,
Yeah, yeah, that's just you just
yeah,
stretched over so much maintenance surface area with
yeah,
that many things. Like you're running a repair business,
yeah,
not a grow at that point.
100%. And even if you're not, even if things aren't breaking and you're not repairing things, just walking through to check on everything to make sure that it's not broken. Like there's almost no time to work on plants, or you need like a whole crew just specifically for maintenance and preventative maintenance.
So true. I've been thinking a lot about maintenance recently. I read this amazing book called Maintenance of Everything that takes what seems like a boring topic and uses it as a through line to talk about some really interesting stuff. And the book is captivating. And the point being is that there's different strategies about maintenance. You have some people who just ignore it and pay the price. There's other people who are like really good at it and do it all the time. And then there's also like, how do you set up different domains, whether it's a business, a facility, or something in a way so that it only requires the minimum amount of maintenance. You set it up so it's really durable. Thinking about a facility like this, it's just like this is the opposite of that, where you set up a domain where it requires a massive amount of maintenance. But the truth stands that like, you look at it in different ways, and maintenance is what wins you wars. Maintenance is what makes
Absolutely.
grows profitable. It's like, yeah, if you're not doing it, then you pay the price. It's not something that you can just put off over the long term.
Yeah, I'm very lucky here at this greenhouse. My right hand man, Shay Tainter, and he has actually been with this greenhouse since they built it in 2018. So he knows every single piece of equipment. He knows everything that he has put a band-aid on over the past 8 years. It's been awesome to get to work with him and actually schedule out our preventative maintenance and, talking to vendors for the equipment that we have and ask. That's the first thing I always do in a new facility is contact the vendor. Hey, when should we be doing preventative maintenance on this? How often do we need to be cleaning these valves, cleaning these hoses, cleaning these solenoids, anything like that? And then sitting down with a calendar and scheduling it and making sure that everyone knows when it has to be done, how it has to be done, and sticking to that schedule. The maintenance and preventative maintenance schedule is just as important as your cloning or harvesting schedule.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think people's eyes tend to glaze over when they think about maintenance, but it is like the secret sauce right there. If you're not doing what you said, then the whole thing, the wheels just slowly come off. When a new operation brings you in, and this has happened a lot of times at this point, you've seen a lot. What's the first thing you're kind of like walking in and looking at in a facility?
Honestly, irrigation strategy. Being pulled into a lot of gardens that were failing when I took over them. The biggest problem that I think I've seen has been irrigation strategy. This greenhouse, for example, when I came in, they were feeding a 1.2 EC and just overwatering everything. And they thought everything in the building had HLVD. They're like, everything has it. We swear it has it. That's why we're not doing well. And I was like, all right, let's do some tests. We brought in a lab, took some tissue samples, sent it all out. Everything came back negative. And before we even got those results back, we bumped up the EC on the feed and we pulled down the volume of water that was going through the pot by almost half every single day. And before the results even came back in, everything looked 100 times better than it did on the first day I was there. I think everybody, especially new growers and people that have not had the experience with crop steering irrigation strategy, the default is just to overwater everything. Everyone's scared that their plants aren't getting enough water and they're just pushing water through the media. And too much water, I think, is worse than not enough water.
Yeah, man, that's a good point. And maybe you just answered this question already, but what's the most common thing you end up fixing in facilities? The thing you see over and over?
The irrigation strategy and workflow efficiencies and how much plant touching is going on throughout the day. Labor is the most cost intensive thing in a cultivation facility. So limiting the number of times people have to go in and touch plants, limiting the number of times you have to move plants from room to room or bench to bench, that can significantly save money throughout the course of a flower cycle.
Yeah, it's funny. I think I said something rather similar on a previous recording about like how I really specifically count and engineer the number of plant touches it takes to get a plant from clone through harvest and trimming. And you want to like work through every step. And I can't remember exactly what I said, but I believe I got a little bit of heat on Instagram in the comments about people
Yeah.
thinking that I had like pared it down too far to like too few plant touches. But I don't
It's
know, I stand by it.
I agree, man. The plant doesn't need you to touch it. Like there's specific pruning times to cue reactions that we want to get from the plant. But other than that, just leave it alone. The newest room that we just loaded, we topped because we ended up giving it an extra week of veg and they were just going to be monsters if we didn't top them. I'm a firm believer that putting more plants into a room and not topping them will get the same or better yield as a slightly lower plant count that has been topped. And your cost per pound is going to be significantly cheaper because you didn't have to pay people to go into that room and top the plants before they go.
I 100% agree. And I have really good empirical data on this where I've tracked this over many facilities over many years. And it's easily 85% of strains will always yield better untopped or at least as good. And then there's just here and there a couple of weird ones where they just don't grow in the right architecture unless they're topped. But
Right.
I think topping is way overused as a strategy in general. And if you think you need to do it, you probably don't and should at least experiment with, moving in the direction of what you just said. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the market right now. So I'm just curious, like, what are you kind of seeing out there, either in like the cultivation side of things as techniques and methods change, also in the sales and strain, just any interesting observations you have with what you're seeing out in the world right now?
Vegas market is doing pretty well right now. There were a lot of cultivation facilities that shut down last year. And so now there's kind of a demand for really good weed where we're lucky that we have a limited license structure here and they're not really, as far as I know, there's not any talk about opening that up for more cultivations. They're putting more stores out all the time, but as far as I know, there's no new cultivation licenses being released by the state. Like October of 2025, we were getting like $650 per pound. Sometimes we could get 800, and currently the lowest that we're getting is 850. And our high 20% or over 30% testing strains, we're getting between 1,000 and 1,250, which is awesome. You can sustain a business with those numbers. I had never really had a lot of experience with sales or working with stores before I came into this greenhouse, and it opened my eyes and kind of annoyed the hell out of me that the stores are really the only place that are making money right now. A lot of corporations that are in cannabis that have a cultivation, production, and store, from what I've been told, are set up so that the cultivations are taking on most of the debt. They set it up so that the store looks good. Their investors in the store get their money back. They can show everybody that they're making all of this money, but in reality, overall, as a company, they're either breaking even or they're actually losing money. Fighting with buyers at stores about, yes, we're a greenhouse, but we're also producing the same quality flower as an indoor facility. So no, I'm not going to sell it to you for $300 less than what you're buying it from this guy who has an indoor facility. The stigma of greenhouse grown flower is pretty bad. I think people just don't understand difference between like a hoop house greenhouse and a fully controlled automated mixed light greenhouse. It's a completely different scenario. But yeah, the market in Vegas has come around. I'm hoping that it stays that way. As far as like supplies and stuff, I haven't seen a huge increase in price, but I know it's coming. Cocoa prices have gone up a little bit. Some of the nutrient prices are starting to go up. I know people are starting to get a little bit worried about where they're going to source minerals from, and yeah, we'll see how that all works out.
Well, that's good to hear that the market there is doing well. That's encouraging at least, and sounds like maybe some of those facilities that shut down needed to get shut down. And I share your pain when it comes to people not appreciating like controlled environment greenhouse flower, because I really think that is the best of the best when it comes down to it. You're getting a lot of the consistency and control that you have indoors, but with the added benefit of all of the natural spectral distribution that you get from sunlight. And you do get something when it's done right that's just kind of special. And I don't think you can really match it indoors. So, on the fertilizer side of things, take us back to how you landed on Front Row and how you came back here, and maybe just give us like the story of what that looked like.
In Denver, when I was working for Willie, even before I was working for Willie, we were running Veg Plus Bloom. I don't know the details, but when that kind of splintered and Front Row came about, I was very close friends with Leland and Zach, and I trusted them, and they were like, "Hey, we got this new recipe, this new fertilizer company," and that's all I had to hear. I was like, "Hey, I trust you guys. Let's go. Let's run it." So I've been using Front Row pretty much since it started. I think switching over to that, we saw a pretty noticeable difference in terpene production and THC numbers. And what I attribute it to is the micronutrient profile that's in the Component Plus and also in the 3-part of Front Row. I really believe that the micronutrients are where your terps and your flavor and flower expression come from. And talking about flower expression, one other thing that I noticed was on the brand that they were using, the crown of every plant pretty much looked exactly the same. And when you would smoke it, everything tasted the same with like a little hint of the specific terpenes that or flavonoids that it had for each strain. And switching over to Front Row, you could tell the difference in the crown of the plant of every top cola. Everything looked different based off of the strain, and then the flavor profiles just came through way, way, way better.
That's what we like to hear right there. What was that onboarding? How did those conversations go? Did you change anything as part of the onboarding? You got like kind of a nice custom setup. Anything else there that was noticeable?
We really didn't have to change too much. We were lucky that what they were using at the time kind of seamlessly transitioned over because I knew it was so easy to mix. And I knew that I was going to be spending most of my time training the staff on new processes and the new way that we were going to go about growing in the facility. And I wanted all of my attention on that instead of, did they mix 5 parts of this nutrient recipe the right way? And are these signs that I'm seeing from the nutrients, or is it from the environment? And just having something that I was comfortable with, that I knew worked properly, and being able to just kind of set that and forget it was huge, with being able to train the staff and get everything else in this facility up to where it needed to be.
And what's the support been like once you were up and running? When something comes up in a room, what happens?
The support from Front Row is amazing. That's one of the biggest reasons I've always stuck with Front Row, even going back to before, when I was working with Zach and Leland. Everybody at Front Row just wants their customers to be able to grow the best weed possible, and they're there anytime you have a question, text message, phone call. They're always answering, they're always picking up, even down to the water analysis support that you guys provide. Like, I can hit you guys up and be like, hey, I'm seeing this weird thing. Like, let's test our water. Let's test our nutrient mix and make sure everything is right where we want it to be. And within 2 days, I've got a box with bottles and instructions and an SOP for how to collect this water. And all I got to do is put a sticker on it and send it back. And I mean, within like a week, you guys have results on every single nutrient mix that we're feeding, plain water, to make sure that there's no fusarium or any nasty microbials in there that we don't want. So support from Front Row is huge.